Hello, this is Kyle Norman, the 3D printing application expert at MLC CAD Systems, and today I'm going to show you an Eiger overview. Eiger is the cloud-based slicer for the Markforged 3D printers, including the Metal X. Now let's launch this. So we're launching Google Chrome. Eiger runs inside of Google Chrome. When Eiger opens up, this is what you'll see. This is a view of your library. This will be all your parts that you have stored inside of your library. On the left, you'll see your projects. Across the top ribbon bar is your search, your help, your available printers, so any printers that you have available on your network, your print history, so all the print jobs that you have run, your notifications, so any notifications if a machine has run out of material or paused for any reason, it's going to show here. And then you're able to import your STL files directly right here by pressing this button. Now let's look at Eiger Settings. That is here. So under Settings, let's go to Support. So at Support, depending upon your machine or what you're looking for, this will show the desktop, the industrial, and also materials, software, and any troubleshooting guides. This will be all your online documentation, anywhere from the quick start guide down to periodic maintenance that needs to happen for each machine. Next in line is the shop. This will take you to the Markforged website to shop for consumable materials. Next is your user account settings. This is where you would set your password, your preferred unit of import, your graphics quality, additional notifications. This is when the printer either times out or reaches the end of a job, it will send you an email. You can as well set secondary authentication. Now let's take a look at our organization here on the left. This is where you would manage your organization settings. You add members, edit membership, you can transfer ownership, or delete the organization altogether. You can change your activities notifications. So again, if your printer runs out of materials, who does it notify? And then invitations. If you're going to add coworkers to your Eiger account, this is where you would put their email and hit send invite. You will want to only have one Eiger library per organization. So if you have 5 users in your organization that are 3D printing, you will want to send the 4 notifications out to the other 4 users and manage those here. Now let's look at our dashboard here on the left hand side. This is going to give us printer statistics. This will be jobs per week, printer use by user, material used per week, parts uploaded per week, and you can download all of this information into a CSV file for reporting. We also have a print history button here, which is exactly the same as the print history button across the top ribbon bar. Gives us the same information, which is all of our print history throughout the organization. Next is our available printers. Again, same as the button on the top ribbon bar, shows us the printers in our organization and their status. So let's jump back to the library just by hitting the library button. Now to import a file, remember we had a button on the top ribbon bar, but we can also just hit this import STL file, open up a file. It's going to bring you to this screen. Hold down your left mouse button will be your rotate. Your scroll wheel will scroll in and out. And then we can save this. Now, we imported this file directly into our library, but we just as easily could have created a new project. And let's call this demo and save it. And if we open up this project, we can add parts to this project just by hitting the add part. And this shows a list of parts in our library. So we're going to add the file that we just created. But we can also import files directly into this project, just like this. Now we're going to hit save. Once your file is saved, it gives you all your part details for your particular part. The dimensions, which will be the dimensions of the actual part, your print time, material cost, the mass of the final part, and the plastic volume. Also, this will save versions. So as we make changes to this part, we're going to come back to this and see the versions. This is typically a feature we see of a high-end data management system, but is built right into this slicer and can be a really valuable tool. So first things first, I probably would not print this part like this, so I would want to make this face down facing. So I'm just going to click on it. So when I click on a face, it is going to make that particular face that I indicate down facing, just like that. So we want it down facing like this. Now let's look at the part settings. This is where we would choose our base material. Now remember, I said this slicer runs all of the Markforged machines, which is why you see a nylon, an onyx, and 17-4 stainless steel for the Metal X. So today, we're just going to use onyx. We'd also choose our reinforcement material. It's either a fiberglass, a carbon fiber, a Kevlar, or a high strength, high temp glass. Today, let's just use carbon fiber. And then we would set our printer. So whether you have a desktop, an industrial series, or a metal machine, this is where you would pick your machine. For today, let's use an X7. Okay, we have made our material and machine selections. So what if we wanted to rotate this part? We have two ways we can do that. We have a manual rotation where you can grab an axis and just twist it like this, or we can manually enter the degree of rotation here. Now let's take a look at part settings. First thing you'll see is your supports. The first toggle button will turn your supports on or off. The next one is turbo supports. This is a fast support. It's a little bit faster than your standard support. However, it does have some limitations, and inside of tight geometry it can be very difficult to remove. Now our support angle would allow us, instead of a standard X orientation, we could change this to an angle of 45 degrees for any particular geometry. Next would be a raised part. So if we had a part that only contacted the build plate in one area and it would change the lower surface finish, we would go ahead and raise part so that the whole part was off of the build plate. We also have an expand thin feature. Expand thin feature is going to automatically go in and expand any geometry that will not print or will not lay fiber, and it's going to make it big enough so that it will work. Now warning, it does scale the entire part, so it's going to change all of your geometry. The next one is your brim. The brim would be if we had a part that only had slight contact with a build plate, or we were having warping issues, we would go ahead and use brim on that part, and it would print a brim around the part to give it additional adhesion to the build plate. Next, we can change our units. So if our part imported as metric and it was supposed to be standard, we would change it to imperial units and vice versa. Scale. So if we wanted our part half scale of our original CAD model, we can change the scale right here. Our layer height in millimeters. This, you'll notice it is grayed out. It is grayed out because you cannot change a layer height when you have selected a fiber. If we turn the fiber off, your layer height can be changed according to the model that you have. This being an industrial machine, we can print at 50 micron layers all the way up to 200 micron layers. Finally is cloud slicing. You can choose to slice your model in the cloud, not using your local resources, or you can slice it locally. Locally can be faster depending upon your local resources that you are utilizing at the time. Now let's take a look at material settings. In your material settings, this is where you will set your infill pattern, your fill density, roof and floor layers, and your wall layers. Your infill pattern is going to be default set to triangular fill, but you also have the ability to change it to hexagonal or rectangular fill. Triangular fill is the strongest and works for most applications. Your fill density is going to default to 50%. You can turn this up or down depending upon what you're trying to accomplish for your particular application, as well as the roof and floor layers you can turn up, and wall layers depending upon your application. This particular default setting will work for the vast majority of parts that people print today. Now let's take a look at your reinforcement settings. Let's turn the carbon fiber back on. Now your reinforcement settings here, your total fiber layers are defined by this slide bar. Don't be afraid to mess around with this. I typically try to put it somewhere in this vicinity. And we're going to cover more about this in just a minute. Now your fiber fill, you can choose either concentric or isotropic. Concentric fiber seems to work pretty well, conserves fiber. Isotropic is uses a lot of fiber. I tend to pick concentric fiber for the most part. And then for the most part, you want to use all walls. You may only be concerned about your inner holes or islands. In that case, you would pick your inner holes or outside only. And then fiber rings. It's going to default to 2. Sometimes you may only want 3 or 4 or 5, but sometimes you want your part to be completely full and you don't know how many rings that's going to take. So you can put a large number there and the part will only place as many rings as will fit into your part. So for this one, let's just give it a number of 25. Now we're going to go ahead and save this project so that it will update our part details over here and we'll know our print times and material costs. Okay, our part is saved and our part details are updated. So we see this is a 14-hour print job with a material cost of $154. Something to point out here is the versions. So now that we have saved this twice, we have multiple versions that we can revert to. This is really handy if you make some changes and later on down the line you realize that your original save was where you needed to be. Next, let's talk about the internal view of the part. Now that we have all of our part settings set for our material and our reinforcement, let's go ahead and take a more detailed dive into this. As you see, everything in this view that is blue is fiber, and this part has got a lot of fiber in it. Now, in the upper left-hand corner here, we're seeing our part statistics like we saw at the previous screen. This is showing us our print time, material usage, and part costs. The ribbon bar is exactly the same from the previous screen, but what we have different here is a visibility button. Now your visibility is going to drive the visibility of your layers, and each part of your part is on a layer for reinforcement fiber, infill, support, Brim. So let's just take a look. So if we were to turn our support material off, our Brim off, notice those are disappearing. So this would allow you to take a deep dive into this part and really see your fiber layout. Now notice down here on your bottom status bar, it has split the fiber layout into two sections. By default, it wants to put fiber in here in a sandwich panel layout, which can be extremely strong. So what we're going to do is, let's just optimize this a little bit, and we can just dynamically drag these pull bars around according to what we're trying to accomplish. So you can see right there where the fiber got to a very low usage. So we're gonna pull it past that. Now if we look at the side view, we can see how we're doing a sandwich panel effect here. We have fiber on the top and fiber on the bottom. We don't necessarily need fiber in the middle because we're getting our strength properties from this sandwich panel effect. I think we're going to turn this one down just a little bit here. Now notice, when I change this, your price and usage is updating up here in your part statistics dynamically. Now, if you recall, I put 25 loops of fiber into this part. That might be a little excessive. So we can change that easily right here on our concentric fiber rings. So let's turn this down to, let's try 6. And then let's do the same on the bottom section as well. Now, it's dynamically updating this part. So you're seeing it change layer by layer. It's also updating our estimated print time and our material usages. Now let's say we had a part that required a third group of fiber. It's really simple with this screen to add that. What we do is we just grab and drag. So we've now created a group there. We're gonna actually let it create that group. And then if we wanted to put fiber in that group, we'd hit add fiber. Now it's picking my default. Remember, I put 25 rings at the previous screen. We're going to drop that down to 6. And we can as well change any of our reinforcement settings right here at this screen. Now it's adding this part. Now we're going to hit save to save our changes. Now let's switch this part to 2D mode. Now what we see here is a view layer by layer. Now let's say we were going to put a captured fastener into this particular part. So we have drawn the geometry in there. So we see we're gonna drop a hex nut in there. So we see it appear, and as we page through this, it's building the walls. So there is the first roof layer on that void for the hex nut. So right here, we're going to tell the machine to pause after layer. Now once we do that, it leaves a marker here. This is the pause. Okay? Now we can pull out here. Let's say we're worried about this geometry. We can actually have it scan after layer on the industrial machine. So at X7 will scan geometry and send you an inspection report. So now it's added a second line for laser scans. So it's showing our marker there at that particular place. Now we can hit save. It is important to mention at this point that after each one of these, either a pause or a laser scan, it is going to create a report and send you an email of the resulting geometry scan, or tell you that it is in pause mode and waiting for some sort of interaction at the machine. So next, let's switch over back to part view since we have our part all set up and ready to print. Now before we go to print mode, let's glance back at our reinforcement settings. Notice all of our settings now are grayed out. That's because we made custom changes in our internal view. Now, if we need to go back and change these, we can turn this preserve custom fiber settings off, and that will revert to our original settings here, but will undo all of the settings that we did in the internal fiber settings. So next, let's go to print our part. All right, at our print screen, we have the same statistics that we have seen on previous screens, showing us our print time, material usage, and material cost. But here on the right, we have some new settings, our print settings. So we can change the build name to this. Let's call it demo. This allows us to save builds out if we put multiple parts on here and then come back to the build. Printer type, sometimes you can change the printer type. This particular build we cannot because we added a scan to the job. We can select our printer, so here we're going to select our Mark X. Cloud print generation, this is just like on the previous screen. It's going to send out the whole build job, slice it, bring it back, or you can turn this off and run it on your local resources. Parts and build. So we already have our part here. We can just pick this thing and drag it wherever we want on the build plate. Okay, now if we need to add a part, remember we created a part in this project earlier, so we'll add this part to it, and we can drag this anywhere we need, and we can add as many as we want. So just by continuing to click, and it's going to show you a quantity number right here. And we can drag these anywhere they need to go in the build. Okay, so let's say we decide we don't need that particular cube. We can just kill it right there. Really easy and simple. All right, so now we have the ability to either save our build or export our build because we have export build checked here. So if we change it to our printer and we hit print, that printer is in use right now. So we're just going to add it to the queue. Now we'll see our demo job has showed up in the queue under this particular machine. Once this job completes, the build plate is cleared, you'll be prompted to start this build job at the machine. This concludes my Eiger overview. Thanks for watching today, and have a great day.